Hey everybody, this is Craig from Bass Lessons Melbourne. I'm here at Noisegate with the president of Aguilar, Dave Boonshoft. Dave?
Craig, thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. It's great to spend some time with you today. You're down in Australia, down in Melbourne, to talk about obviously your range of equipment. Mm-hmm. But if we could just maybe go back a little bit and talk about your days in New York leading up to the formation of Aguilar. Tell us how that came around.
Okay, well, I came to New York from St. Louis, and I wanted to be a studio musician. So, and I wanted to play with the really great players, which I perceived at the time that most of them were in New York. And,
yeah,
and in fact, there was
still very much the case.
There was some terrific bass players, and still are.
Yeah.
So I ran around playing every possible gig I could get. Some were good, some were bad, and some were just ugly, you know. But to make a long story short, I became acquainted through studio work with vintage audio gear, mm-hmm. and decided I wanted a preamp that I could take with me to sessions and get my own sound, bypass the mic pre's in the console, and go straight to tape, which is no longer with us, but that's what we had back then. So that led to me searching out an engineer whose name was Alex Aguilar.
Right.
And together we designed the DB680.
Yep.
And the product was just for me to take around. But due to entrepreneurial spirit, I thought, you know, other bass players might like to have this.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of the company.
And so that was a tube preamp?
It was an all-tube preamp, although it did have two dual parametric EQs right in the middle of it.
Okay.
And those have to be solid state. So really it was a hybrid. We called it all-tube, but the parametrics obviously were in the signal path.
And it was a hit, it was a success, people liked it?
You know, it was a great product for professional musicians. It had a lot of stuff on it that were great for recording. Great balanced output with the gang resistor switch, stuff that you don't necessarily have to have unless you're going to do a recording session and bypass the console.
Yeah.
So it was a great product. Some of the early adopters were John Patitucci, who's still one of our endorsers today, mm-hmm. Howie Epstein, who was the great bass player that's unfortunately not with us any longer, from Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith.
Okay.
So it was a great product for professionals, and I'm glad we made it. Now we have a much broader range of bass products.
Yeah. So maybe tell us a little bit more about your musical journey as a bass player.
Sure.
And what that's been like for you.
Well, you know, I was one of the generation of kids who sat in front of the TV and saw the Beatles play on the Ed Sullivan Show. And, you know, I always wanted to play guitar. Turned out chords baffled me. So I thought bass was going to be easier eventually. I became a bass player as a teenager and largely self-taught. Mm-hmm. I eventually came to New York to work as a session musician. And I did every conceivable gig, Latin music, we did all kinds of recording. There was still a recording scene. So you didn't necessarily have to be at the top of the pile to do publishing demos. I did millions of children's books. I toured with the Mommas and the Pappas, the later years. You know, there was always the... So the later years, that was still a pretty good gig and great musicians on it. Jingle dates. And eventually I became involved in a record company called Naked Music, which is still exists today. It's electronica, but we do kind of R&B and new soul music. And my experience in the studios is largely what brought me to wanting to design gear, but it really was for myself. I didn't start with an intention of being a manufacturer. Mm-hmm. The funny thing about it is that we all have these kind of dark secrets. So my secret thing was, and I didn't remember it. I think I had blocked it out because my father was an engineer, And he was one of those guys that, you know, if you wanted something, he would kind of go, well, we don't have to buy it. We'll just build it, you know, if something broke around the house. So every weekend, instead of being out with my buddies, it was like, today we're going to regrout the bathroom, or we're going to install a new toilet. It was like, you know, and he had his tool shop.
These are great life skills.
You know, if you need me to regrout your bathroom, I'm the guy.
1-800-DAVE-GROUT.
I can do it. 1-800-DAVE-GROUT, yes. So, you know, eventually I talked him into buying me an electric guitar, but I didn't have an amplifier. So I said, Dad, I need an amplifier. He was like, well, why buy one? We can build one. How hard could it be? So, and I was taking electronics in high school, and so I got the circuit boards. It was a Heath kit. I don't know if they have it here in Australia, but you know, they sent you a bag of resistors and, you know, schematics and some boards, and you know, you can populate the boards, and you know, hopefully it's going to work and everything. Mine never worked, and eventually I bought an amp by saving my lunch money. I saved it in a box, and finally I bought an amp off of one of my friends because the one I built wasn't happening. But sometimes I ask myself, what maybe after we built the preamp, and I could have just gone off and continued with my, such as it was, career as a musician. Yeah. What made me kind of go, you know, we can build one. So, but I think that's how it works from generation to generation. Somewhere in my head, that was kind of going,
comes back around.
It comes back around. We can build one, and it'll add, you know, hopefully some value to the world, and can be. And now we look at it as a great journey of building musical tools, and you know, really in the end, it's about the music. Yeah. It's not about the tools, and that's what we continue to try to do. So,
yeah, nice. And so going from the 680, was the next step building it into a power amp for the 750?
Yeah, you know, after we did that, we thought, all right, what are we missing here? And believe it or not, we thought a power amp would be a good idea. Now, at the time, we were very focused on tubes. So we thought it would be a good idea to make a 400-watt tube monoblock. So it had two huge transformers, both toroidal.
As long as they were balanced on each side.
They were balanced on each side. It was if you had the strength, you could pick it up without twisting.
Right.
It used 8 6550s. Eight. So great sounding amp, very warm. And that went with the DB680. So if you had the full rig, you had a nice sized 6-bass rack.
Yeah.
And
a couple of guys to lift it.
A couple guys to lift it, and but it was a truly great sounding rig. And there's still bass players out there today
for sure
who have a 680 and a 728.
Wow. And what is it, do you think, about tubes that bass players, recording engineers, audiophiles, what is it about tubes and valves that people like?
Well, people like the way they distort, because they distort in a very musical way. So, you know, you get the even nodules on the overtone series.
Right.
The octaves, thirds, and fifths, that make the music sound warm. And that's what separates music from noise, is our ability to hear the overtones. You know, if you tap on the stool here, you're going to hear just a clunk. You're not going to hear any overtones. So the combination of overtones that you hear when you play a piano or hit a string is what makes music sound good, the way we want it to hear. And tube distortion emphasizes the really consonant overtones, the ones that make it sound rich and full.
And when you're talking about distortion, we're not talking about overdriving. It's more it's not so much a detectable.
Yeah, it's not fuzz.
Yeah.
It's really an emphasis on the overtones that exist in the overtone series. Yeah. The consonant ones.
Yeah. So what were those early days like in Aguilar in New York?
Well, it was basically me and Alex. We had no employees. And we did everything. And then eventually we had one employee.
Yeah.
Then we had two. And we had a couple little rooms. One was down the hall. So as we added employees, some of them were down the hall, some of them were over here. Eventually, we moved to a much larger space in Soho, which we still have today.
Right.
And we continued on there and grew from there.
Yeah.
Alex and I split up late 2003, and I continued on with the company.
And you started around 1995?
1995. So 2020 is our silver anniversary.
Wow.
So anybody who wants to send some silver, anything silver, you can just send it to Soho, and we'll appreciate it.
You'll melt it down and make
we'll melt it down and
yeah.
make silver amplifiers.
It's funny because I still think of Aguilar as being a relatively new company in the bass world, but when you say 25 years, it's like, well, yeah, not really.
Well, the first 10 years, I think we were a much more esoteric company.
Right.
So, as we started to do more hybrid amplifiers, and then eventually all transistor amplifiers, different speaker lines, pedals, I think that would be the last 15 years.
Yeah.
So we had the first 10 years of being kind of esoteric tube bass gear, and then a very broad expansion of the product line.
Yeah, yeah.
But it feels, it's like anything. It feels like we just started last week, and then sometimes it feels like, oh man, we've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously one of the biggest advancements in bass technology of recent years is the use of digital power supplies and amps and stuff like that. And you guys brought out the Tonehammer 500 a few years ago.
Right.
But you still also offer the tube, the revised DB751.
Sure.
How much of that kind of tube DNA or that sound are you guys able to transfer over into your lightweight?
Well, you can transfer over a lot. So the Tonehammer series, the 350, the 500, and the new 700 are all amps that never really clean up. So they always have, they're designed to have that overtone emphasis that we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The emphasis of the consonant overtones, that is what tubes have. So it's not anything that I hate when people say this is tube emulation.
Yep.
It's, you either create that harmonic structure in the design or you don't.
Right.
But the Tonehammer has that.
Yeah.
And it's designed to be that way. And we certainly went for that type of sound that's baked into the DB750 and now the 751.
Yeah, right. And so what's different about the AG700 from, example, the Tonehammer 700?
Well, everything. And it's funny, people say, well, isn't the Tonehammer the Aguilar sound? The truth of the matter is that we're just making good tools. And we thought, all right, well, what if somebody didn't want something that had that baked in distortion or harmonically rich overtone emphasis? What if we made an amp that was all about clean headroom? And because we have no problem with clean headroom, that's a beautiful thing too, and has its own harmonic emphasis.
Yeah.
So the AG700 was a design that was designed to be big and open, and definitely doesn't have the harmonic distortion that the Tonehammer has.
Yeah, right.
So, sometimes depending on how silly we're being, we'll say, one's chicken, one's steak, which one, you don't want to necessarily have one all the time.
In my time, I've had a 750, and I had one of the original AG 500 SCs, just a single channel.
Yeah.
So I think that was kind of the first one. This 500 was the first one you brought out after the 750.
Sure. The 500 was definitely a hybrid of technology because it had a traditional toroidal power transformer, but it was a Class D amplifier.
Right.
So it was a switching amp.
Okay.
That was a great amp, and the AG700 has it. Even though the circuitry is different, we thought about the sound of the AG500 and what people did like about that amp in designing the AG700.
Okay.
So we wanted to cover that territory.
Hence why it's got a similar fascia and AG.
Yep.
All right.
And it's interesting talking about the DV751. Not that we were, but we kind of were.
Yeah.
But we are now.
Yeah, we are now.
Because I've changed the subject. It's it's an all-tube preamp and an extremely clean power section.
Yep.
So you think, okay, when you design an amp and you measure the distortion, you're measuring the total harmonic distortion. So once you use tubes, it's through the roof anyway. What would be the point of using a super clean power section? But it kind of adds up in a really specific way, and I kind of think of it like the Beatles.
Okay.
Not that, because, it's a combination of what everything is bringing to the table.
Some is greater than the parts kind of thing.
It really is. So this DV751 is a really clean power section and an all-tube preamp. And it adds up, it sounds like a big, open, clean amp with the additional tube warmth. And that's why, even though it does weigh a bit.
Does it?
Well, it's about 43 pounds. So,
it's worth it.
It's there have been heavier bass amps by far.
Yep.
But it's that combination of elements that it's been many years that we've been making the 751 or its predecessor, and we still sell about the same amount of those amps every month.
That's great.
Almost down to the actual number.
Yeah. And over the years, you've kind of built up an amazing roster of artists that you work with. How have they influenced the products that you've been releasing?
Well, generally they don't, because I don't like to design by committee. And I found out early on when we were working on the 680, and I felt insecure about the balanced output, some of the levels. So I started asking all my engineer friends, and everybody had a different idea.
Right.
And so one day I changed some of the parameters, and about a week later I thought, wow, why did I do that? That wasn't what what I wanted. So everybody has to use the tools, and they're going to hear things differently and use them differently. But it's important that between myself and our chief engineer, Goran Stankovic, and David Venius, who's part of the product team, that we understand what we're doing and what we're offering. So we'll take feedback, but it's always after the fact.
Okay.
The one exception was years ago, Gary Willis, a great bass player, came into the shop, and we were showing him our new GS112.
Yep.
And I had settled on a prototype that I said, this is it. I said, Gary, come into the sound room and take a listen. And because we certainly want people's input, especially somebody that good.
Yeah.
But I thought, I'll just show him and he'll be impressed. So he was like, I don't know. And then he kind of wandered around the shop, and we had a pile of stuff we had rejected. And he said, what about that one right there? And he just kind of zoned in on it. And I said, no, don't look at that. Don't look. That's done. But he insisted, and we put it in the sound room. And he played. About 2 hours later, he came out and he said, Dave, you have to make that. That's the one. That's the GS112. And I remember kind of going, gee, I don't know. But honestly, in retrospect, he really called it.
Right.
And so GS stands for Georgia and Stella, who are my kids. But maybe it should stand for Gary
Says
Willis
Gary,
with the
Gary's
S on the end.
Apostrophe S.
So we love to show the stuff to players and get their input, but we don't design by committee.
Sure.
Because then you get really confused designs.
Yeah, you got to pick your thing and go with it.
We have to, and again, I work with a great engineer. If I didn't, it would be impossible.
Yeah.
Goran Stankovic is our new engineering partner, and he's terrific. We have great communication, because I couldn't realize the designs by myself. Everybody would get electrocuted. We wouldn't want that. So it would be really
sounds great, but
bad for the reputation, So
yeah.
that's how we do it.
Yeah, cool. And then obviously going from amplifiers, you've got a range of cabinets.
Right.
And most recently, we've had the super lightweight 112s, and you're bringing out super light 210 as well, and the 212, is that right?
Well, we have the super light SL 112. A few years ago, we brought out the SL 410X.
Okay.
And so we've had that for a while. Now we have the variant of that, which is the SL 210, which is brand new. And I think about a year or two ago, we brought out the SL 212.
Right.
So really have the ability to mix and match. Oh, and I almost forgot. A year ago, we brought out an SL 115, which is a great cabinet.
Oh, cool.
No tweeter in it, but it sounds very full range.
I play a 15 and I don't generally use the tweeter on it. For some about 15s actually have quite a lot of.
They go up
up
pretty high. I mean, you're really just not going to get what you want from a tweeter around 2.5, 3K. And a lot of times that's going to be air or string noise, and sometimes you want that in there. You want that blended in to kind of add some sizzle.
Yeah.
But often it's not necessary.
Sure.
That's why when we have a tweeter, it has a variable potentiometer on the back.
Yeah.
So you can get the amount that you need or don't need.
Yeah. And the future, what's kind of anything in the pipeline? What are you guys looking to develop or build on next?
Well, we haven't talked about pickups. So
pickups, yeah.
We started doing pickups a few years ago, and that's a really big and growing part of our business.
Yeah.
We're making it for many manufacturers. We don't do any true what you call OEM designs, where somebody might say this is designed. This is a Spectre pickup designed by Aguilar. The pickups that Spectre is using, or ESP or Ibanez, are all the exact same pickups that you can buy at retail. So
again, it's like just sticking with your one thing and people using it. Not designed by committee, just having. Well, this is it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our job. Our job is to design the gear, and hopefully it's going to be gear that is going to help people make their music. Sometimes we'll work with an instrument builder and they'll say, well, and it usually goes like this. Well, that's the best jazz bass pickup we've ever heard. But I was thinking, what can we do to add more mid-range to it? And I think, all right, why would I do that? It's like, well, because it's everything's a complex equation. So you could say, well, we could add more wire to it, but do we add a different gauge?
Yeah.
What is the overlap pattern going to be? And it's going to shift the frequency response as So
yeah.
there's no free lunch in the design world. Everything matters. So my usual response then is, look, you said you really like the pickup. This is what we're making, and 9 times out of 10, that works out just fine.
Yeah.
So we're working on new pickup designs. We have a new pickup that we're going to be. We've announced, and we did a soft announcement at Summer NAMM. It's an original style P-bass pickup, like from 1951 through 55. It has a really nice, very quick attack. And then because the pole pieces, the magnetic field is small around each pole piece, the attack dies pretty quickly, which makes it sound very funky. It's very retro and fun.
Cool.
And when we design something like that, we also think not just about being authentic, but what could be improved. So if you change the winding pattern and the overlap of the winds, all of a sudden you find out that you have better string-to-string bounce, and you change the resonant peaks.
Yeah.
So especially like on a 5-string pickup, we eliminate the hollow B string.
Yep.
The dreaded hollow B string, where you have to either feather it or hit it harder. Nobody wants that.
No.
So in my opinion, that's a pickup issue more than scale length and string gauge.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I play an F bass, and I know that F bass have been using Aguilar pickups for a while, and I think for a company like that, everything they use is pretty much in-house.
Right.
Apart from now their pickup, so I'd say that's a pretty big compliment that somebody like F bass would go, yep, Aguilar pickups are going to be in all our basses from now on.
And we feel that way too. I think F Basses is a great builder.
Yeah,
they make fantastic basses. We have some at our showroom with our pickups in them.
Yeah.
F Basses, Federa, Spectre.
Yeah.
A lot of great companies are using our pickups. We're very grateful for that.
Yeah.
So to answer your question about what we got in the pipeline is the 51 P-bass pickup. We're doing a new Stingray style pickup with ceramic bars, which offers kind of a little bit more harmonic development, but still a very snappy kind of present sound. So I think new pickup designs are in the cards. We're working on some new pedals. Could be some new amps in the future. It's a little early to say.
Yeah.
And we'll keep expanding the SL cabinet line for sure.
Cool. Great. Well, it's been awesome getting a chance to speak with you, Dave. I really appreciate your time, and it's awesome gear. So keep doing what you guys are doing, and I'm sure people will keep using it to make great music.
I hope so.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Dave.